Well, hello everyone to another of our sessions on AI and archival practice, a series of videos that we're producing under the auspices of the ICA's Program Commission and with the very generous support of the National Library and Archives of the UAE. A set of sessions where we're exploring various aspects of archival practice and having a look at artificial intelligence, a broad range of technologies that is, and just really investigating what the practical implications are for AI to apply to archival practice. And for today's session, I'm joined by three of our ICA project team from Kit. Hello, Kit. Good to have you with us again. From Moises. Hello, Moises. Good to see you. And Luis Esteve. Good to see you. Good to have all three of us here together for this discussion. And the topic we're discussing today is using AI for appraisal and selection. And to investigate that, Kit and I earlier had a discussion with Jason Franks, who works in RecordPoint, which has been exploring the application of AI tools within a commercial records management product. So let's just have a listen now to what Jason had to say and to show us when Kit and I had that discussion with him. And also we're very, very fortunate to have with us Jason Franks, Principal Data Scientist from RecordPoint, to talk about some of the development that's been going on in your field, Jason, with AI.
Yes, thanks for having me, David. It's great to be here.
Wonderful.
Thanks for joining us, Jason. So we know that you have been developing a RecordPoint product to incorporate AI to assist with appraisal and selection and generally with records management. Maybe you could share with us like what have you done and how does it work within RecordPoint itself? Thank you.
Yeah. I'll share a screen and I'll give you a real quick tour of the AI capabilities that we have in the RecordPoint product. I'm not a sales guy, so it's not going to be super polished. But I just want to, I guess, give you a rough idea of like what we've done, and then I'll probably show you some stuff that is on the drawing board at the moment. I've got some pucks that I can show you. So share screen.
That's great. Thank you.
Hopefully you see that.
Yeah.
All right. So firstly, I'm going to show the machine learning classification system that we've had in the product for about 5 years now. This, to me, is still the most valuable application of AI to records and archival world, being able to inspect the text of records and assign a category to them on that basis. So I guess this is appraisal, as you mentioned. Now, to begin with, I need some records that have already been classified so that we can train a classifier model. I've loaded the Enron dataset into this environment, so it's not a huge amount of records, but we're close to 1 million. And as you can see on the dashboard, these are the most populous categories that I've classified those records into. So that's going to be the basis of our machine learning training model. Now, I'm not going to show you the training process live because it takes hours sometimes, but basically the way that it works is you select which categories you want to cover in the machine learning model, and then you press the train button and it'll go away and do that. So after a few hours, you'll come back and you'll find that we've got a new model that's been trained. And I guess this is what it kind of looks like from an internal point of view. These metrics that we show here give an indication of how skilled the model is at classifying records to the categories that were in those training sets. So accuracy is probably the most intuitive metric to understand. This is how many records in the test set, what percentage of them were classified correctly. It's a great metric. It's really easy to understand, but unfortunately, you can be quite biased in a situation where the record categories are unbalanced, like the number of records in each category. So, for example, if you had 4 categories in the training set, and one category was 85% of the records, then the model can score 85% accuracy by only predicting that big category. So we have some other metrics that we look at as well when we're deciding if the model is good or not.
Jason, sorry to interrupt. Can you just quickly explain those metrics? I think we understand accuracy, but F1 and recall?
So without getting into the maths of it, precision is kind of the correctness of predictions within a category, and then recall is the completeness. So finding all of the records that are understood, that are correctly predicted by the model within those categories. And then the F1 is the harmonic mean of precision and recall. So this is a pretty good metric to look at in situations where we don't have that good category balance. So this one is a bit more robust than accuracy. Now, this model, we've got about 66% accuracy, or 0.66 on the F1 score. So pretty close to the accuracy there. In fact, identical. That's not a great model. Normally, we would we would want the model to be 80%, 85%, 90%. Is what we'd expect in most customers. So usually what would now happen is we would add more data and keep training until we get up to that level that we want. Now, if we look a little deeper into the model, I can see how good it is at predicting the individual classes within that model. And you can see here that it's pretty terrible at professional and employment and these collaboration categories. So most likely my next step would be find more records in these categories that are classified and train again. So we continue that process a few times until we get the model to where it's performing up at the level that we want. And then once the model's ready, we can start ingesting records, and they'll get classified by this model. But that looks like this. These are all the records that have come in, and with each record, the model gives us a probability, which is how confident it is in the category that's predicted for that record. Now, normally what we would do is we'd set a threshold that says, if we're more than 80% confident in this category, then accept it. And what would otherwise happen here is that a record manager needs to go and accept or refuse the categories. So if you accept them, that's great. If you manually reclassify them to something other than what the model has predicted, then those records will then be used to train the next iteration of the model. And that's a really powerful way of, firstly, of improving a model, and secondly, just keeping it ahead of the data drift. So, when your record formats change over time, the model starts to degrade in performance. And this is a good way of keeping it current without having to start from scratch. So I guess that's the machine learning classification part of the idea for records. And again, I think that's really powerful. Like in our product, the classifications are disposal schedules, but they could be any sorts of classification. And you may have potentially multiple taxonomies that you're applying to your records. I think that's a really important concept. The classification model that we're showing in here, this is it's a support vector machine, so a sort of statistical machine learning model. In my research, I found that if you start using some of the generative AI models, famously now ChatGPT and Gemini and all of those, you do get a small boost in the skill that the models provide, but they're a lot more expensive to run and a lot slower. So I think that even this kind of technology that's a generation or two older than what's the current state of the art gives really good value, and we can get some really good results with it. So I guess that's appraisal, and when it comes to the new language models, I think that they have some really interesting opportunities which we've never had before in the records business. So I'll demo a couple of those quickly. I just want to say up front that this is all POC code. This is not something we have in production. We're still working out how to make this cost effective and scalable for when you've got hundreds of millions or billions of records coming in. But I think it's a really good taste of what the technology can do and how it can change the way that we manage records and archives. So let's say that we are doing a forensic analysis of some of our records, maybe an internal audit, or maybe it's a freedom of information request or something, and I want to find out information about what is in the records. And I've got let's say I've got 500 million records. How do I find that? So let's say we're looking at something to do with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. This being the Enron data set, that's maybe an interesting thing to look at. So I don't have a full RAG system or retrieval augmented generation system up and running yet, but this is a sort of a halfway point to get in there. So let's do a text search for that Corrupt Practices Act and see what records come back. All right, so a summary of dollars at risk for customs. That sounds like we're kind of in the ballpark, right? So let's have a look at the record. This is kind of the provenance of the record where it was uploaded from. Here we can see that classification that was assigned by the machine learning model. It's not super confident in that, but maybe I don't care in this instance. I'm really just interested specifically in the content of the record. So if I look at the signals, signals are metadata that we add to the record using some AI systems. It's not generative AI, but some other, I guess, simpler types of AI that are more efficient to tell us about what's in the record. And I can see it contains PII, personal identifiable information. It has some email addresses. It has some people that are referenced. So what is this record about is probably my next question. And, it may be a really big record. It may be 500 pages long. There may be a bunch of records. But here we can see I've got a summary. So this was provided to me by a large language model, ChatGPT in this case. And I've applied these summaries to the records as they were ingested from the content source, which is a SharePoint site in this scenario. And here's my one-sentence summary courtesy of a large language model. The email is from these people discussing potential risks of payments made to receive informal customs advice, which could be in violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So that sounds concerning. And I guess maybe as a person who's undertaking this audit, I might then like to investigate further. So I'm just going to bring the record up in a different view. Let's find it again. Here's our record. Ask a question. So we built this kind of chatbot type of interface. Again, it's a little rough and ready, but this gives me a way of using a language model to interrogate that record. Now, it's important that I've found the record first, which has the information that I'm interested in, rather than just hoping that ChatGPT knows the answer, because if you ask it a question, it's going to give you an answer, whether it knows or not.
But can I ask there, Jason, to get to this step, the summary of the record was a product of a generative AI.
That's right.
Does that mean that it might have deduced that it was relevant to the Corruption Act, or would that have required an explicit mention of the Corruption Act in the record itself?
So in this situation, I've used a text search to find records that mention that for that act. And again, if I had an AI search hooked up to that text search, then that might have been able to make some slightly better inferences about that. But the these models, like they're clever at understanding what words mean, but they can't really reason. So yeah, so it's a process of narrowing it down, I guess, like anything. All right, so I have my chatbot type of interface. I know that it's connected to the records that I selected before, so it's going to be using them to pull information to answer the questions that I'm going to give it. So let's say we saw from the signals that it has PI, that it refers to some people. So I might ask it that what people are referenced in this text. Now again, like this is an email, but imagine it's an enormous report. It's a 500-page report, or imagine it's 10 or 100 emails that have come back matching our search query. So ChatGPT says that these are the people who are mentioned in the email. We saw some of these names in the summary, so that sounds pretty good. I know also that from the signals that there are email addresses in the text. Maybe that's interesting for my line of inquiry. So I could then go, what email addresses are in the text? So part of the prompt that's going to go to the language model is obviously what I'm typing here. And you notice I always say in this text, make sure that it's looking at, what the system is going to append to it, which is going to be like the text of the records. So here are the emails that it has found in there, and they all look like they're internal Enron emails, or perhaps this is a mailing list. I don't know what these are. That's interesting. But, as you can see, it's the language model is smart, but it's not that smart. Don't know why it thinks that's an email address, but it kind of could be an email address or something like it. It resembles some other email addresses that it, thinks it's found here. All right, so we know that these people are referenced in the email. We know that these are the email addresses. Let's see if we can find out a bit more information about what is in the email. So we're looking at risk as the person who's undertaking this investigation. So I might just say what type of risks are discussed in here. So here we are to summarize the risks that are considered in this record. Possible payments made to receive informal and favorable guidance, discrepancies between the flow diagrams and import lists, specific customs issues related to equipment, issue of goods being imported under the wrong classification. So that's all pretty concerning, right? And then the title of the record is a summary of dollars at risk. So maybe I can even say how much is at risk? Like what's the conclusion here? So in the given text, it's 180 million, which is not peanuts, right? As mentioned in the message from Heidi Hellman. Now, where did this number come from? I know that it didn't do any arithmetic because it's a language model, right? It's good at understanding language or manipulating text, but it can't add very well. It can't reason and it can't plan. So my next step is, now that I've got an idea of what is discussed in the emails, I'm going to fact check it before I take any of these findings any further than this screen. We can have a look at that. So let's go again into the record. I'm going to download the actual text. And let's see what that says. So here's our Steve Keen, Rob Walls, Elizabeth Labanowski, etc. These are all the people that we saw before. Can kind of see why I thought that was an email address, although it's not really. So again, we're seeing some limitations here. I can also tell you that having run these queries many times against this record, you don't always get the same result. But let's see what it says about the issues that are discussed in this email. confirmation of the issue which I've articulated, possible payments made to receive informal and favorable guidance. You see some spelling mistakes in there, which is interesting as well, that it's, the language model has understood that this means payments. Sanjay's fixes, that should make you feel comfortable, right? So obviously something concerning is going on, captured in this email. And then let's have a look. So here we have a breakdown of some of the risks. So we saw some of this in the summary that the language model gave us before, right? When I said, what are the risks? And then total value at risk, 180 million in the worst case. So again, it's pulled that out. It's figured out that this is the headline amount of risk that we're dealing with. So again, it doesn't know everything, but it can be pretty good at, helping you to filter what's in the text, and it's much more powerful than even a really clever regular expression type of search scenario. And probably again, the thing I'd stress is that this only is credible if you are pointing it at like the text which contains the truth. If you're grounding the record in, if you're grounding the query to the language model in the truth, and actually passing the text as part of the prompt to the language model rather than relying on the information that's been trained into it. Even then, you need a fact check because as I said, they these language models, they can't reason or plan, or they're clever but not trustworthy. They're not designed to be trustworthy. That's not that's not one of the training goals that they have. But I also think that in the records and archives business, we're in a really unique position to take advantage of this technology, because the data that we are managing is the truth, or at least we hope it's the truth, or we believe it's the truth, as opposed to the internet out there, which is full of who knows what nonsense. Like, we have hopefully got really good curated data that we can get some really incredible value out of. So yeah, with great power comes great responsibility, as the Amazing Spider-Man says. You can tell I'm a comics guy, I guess. I've spoken quite a lot now, and maybe I'll stop talking and let you guys ask some questions.
Yeah, Jason, on that, so if I could just recap. So the great demonstration, by the way, I mean, really
Thanks.
very, very interesting insight into what you're doing there. I'm fascinated by the use of the large language model to interrogate the records. And you just mentioned then about the need for fact-checking, the need for the archivist to make, or the records manager to make sure that the results coming back were okay. What have you learned if we're trying to understand what is actually in the content, or the real context of the record, versus what's been hallucination by the large language model? What have you learned about how to tell the difference, how to keep an eye on the actual quality of the results you're getting?
So like, usually if you pass the if you pass the record text, so that if you pass the text as part of the prompt, I reckon we're probably 85% of the time it's giving you back information that's credible, that has come out of the document. With a bit of tweaking, you can even make it cite which document that it's come from, if there's multiple documents. And often the language models will tell you they don't know if it doesn't find a good match. But yeah, sometimes they'll make stuff up if maybe they've been trained on some documents that kind of resemble this. Usually what comes back there is kind of not consistent when it's doing that. But yeah, they have no idea about the language models themselves. They're only good at manipulating text, and the probability of what response is going to, so it's what response seems probable, or what it thinks that you're going to want to hear. So you always need to check what it gives you back. And yeah, definitely don't rely on what was trained into the model, because at that point it's gone, right? It's been dispersed into a cloud of probabilities.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason, for the wonderful demonstration. I think it gave me a lot of hope into the industry, actually. Yeah, because currently the system that we're using, I think there are a lot of manual work, and everyone thinks that records management is such a hassle because there's just so many steps involved. And with all this and also AI, I think it gives a lot of people can then be free up for more value-added work, and then it presents a lot of opportunities in terms of finding information in an easier manner. I can't imagine trawling through like emails after emails. But I just want to just ask whether you would know, like, how was the change management process like for user when they first onboard RecordPoint, having to use all this AI to help them do their records management? Will you be able to share some insights? Thanks.
Yeah, so like there's usually like quite a process involved in onboarding a new customer. So firstly, there is the process of connecting up all the different data sources. So where all the records lie, if it's SharePoint or file shares, Exchange, emails, or maybe it's coming out of some sort of a business system. So all of that needs to be configured. So that's the that's probably the first order of business. Don't really work in that side of the organization, so I hope none of them see this and tell me I'm full of nonsense. The next thing is probably to set up the file plan, which is the categories that the records are going to get put into. And again, this can be a bit of a process. If they're a government agency, for example, there's maybe many thousands of categories that need to be set up, or any other highly regulated sort of business. And then those categories usually have a disposal schedule attached to them. That's principally the reason that we classify records. And again, that comes back to what you were just saying before about we want to do stuff. We don't want to just manage the records so we can destroy them. We want to be able to get value out of them, and I think that's that's where the AI frontier becomes really, really interesting. So the file plan needs to go in. Typically what will then happen is we have this set of rules which look at the metadata, and those are used to classify the records as they come in. If there is enough metadata to classify them, and we prefer to use that to the AI because it's more efficient and it's easier to understand the decision making. So setting up the rules, that's a big tree that says if the record comes from this content source and if it has this metadata, the value is in this range, then follow a path that's maybe going to lead to a classification. And then if the rules fail to classify the record, it's going to come to the machine learning system. So especially for data sources like emails or file shares or like social media feeds, the machine learning classification is really valuable because there's no metadata. So yeah, like I guess the process of onboarding a customer is it is lengthy, especially if it's a really big institution, because they've got a lot of data sources. They've got maybe a very big set of categories, and then training the machine learning model can take some time because usually we'd start off training it small or training it to some quite broad categories, and then we'd expand it out as we get better and better at that. So yeah, it can take months sometimes for a really big customer. Obviously, like what I showed you here with 100 million records, is a pretty small environment.
Is there much sort of sharing between customers? I'm also glad you mentioned that thing about the training process, because if every records manager had to start from scratch in doing all of that training, then absolutely, as you're saying, Jason, there's months of work, preparatory work there. But I just wonder what the possibility might be that disposal classes or classification, disposal schedules, records authorities, whatever we call them around the world, might start to line up under some sort of a standard format? We're seeing the day where, look, we've done this in Australia, this will probably now work in Canada. You know, you don't have to do the similar training.
So that would be great. I love the vision. And we are working on some stuff to make that a little bit easier, but really our customers are more concerned with security. They mostly have their own, maybe they'll use, for example, their after disposal schedules, but their own version of it. So nothing is shared at the moment. Everything is like quite carefully firewalled away so that nobody can access anybody else's data. We are kind of looking at maybe having some shared models and some shared particularly like for some of those classification, the disposal schedules. So like after, for example, might be a good one. Having an easy way to import that, maybe that comes directly from the authority and comes into the product. So this kind of going on at the moment, but definitely like the security concerns trump that, and we have to be able to do that before we look at sharing, because we have customers that certainly don't want any risk or anything that belongs to them going outside of their environment.
Yeah, I think the security concern is real. I guess in Singapore context, we are also trying to think of whether there's a way that we can have a common taxonomy across the government, also to facilitate search. But I think everyone is still very wary about what kind of information can be shared across the board. And do you see there's the biggest obstacles in terms of implementing AI in records management context, security, or there are other challenges that you foresee or you have experienced?
Security is always a challenge, just by the nature of what it is and the value of what we're protecting. And there's always new threats, so you always have to be on top of security. It's kind of not optional. But other challenges, I guess especially AI is cost. So for example, what I showed before, the cost of the text index is substantial. We're still, we're pretty close now to being able to make that a kind of commercial offering, but the cost to index and store and access the text, depending on what technology you have and how much you want to access it and what kind of latency you want to have, and getting the text into an somewhere that's indexed, that is substantial. But I think a massive enabler, right, for not just text search, but now the AI-based vector search, and then we start getting into the RAG, which would be a bit more sophisticated for what I've demonstrated here today, but perhaps similar. So that cost of it, the cost to index and store the text is pretty substantial. And then these large language models also, they are very costly to train and host and maintain, and the vendors, Microsoft and Google, etc., charge accordingly. And most of the time, you've got hundreds of millions of records, or billions of records, depending on what kind of organization you are. You have that many records under management. You're not accessing all of them most of the time. So finding like a good affordable way to make sure that the data is available to you, but is not costing you an arm and a leg, like that is a real obstacle. That's a challenge, and we spent years trying to work out the best way to make that happen.
Actually, maybe on that note, looking ahead, from your perspective, right in the middle of this industry, at the leading edge of this industry, it's moving very, very fast, this technology. But when you gaze into your crystal ball, Jason, what do you see the future of this technology being in, say, the 5 to 10 year horizon?
Okay, so I think firstly, the attitude that we're seeing now from some of the vendors, which is just we'll keep scaling it up and it'll be infinitely powerful and it'll give us AGI, artificial general intelligence. I don't believe that. I think that the limitations of the technology now are not going to change. Like in this architecture, this large language model sort of sort of architecture, right? It's probabilistic. It's never going to be good at planning or reasoning. It's never going to be able to add properly. I don't know if you've seen the Math GPT research projects where they say, I trained a language model with 800 billion parameters and I get 85% accuracy on these arithmetic tasks. Right? My calculator is 100% accurate. And I didn't have to destroy the Amazon rainforest in order to train it. So I think that idea that we can just scale it up and we'll get what we want. I don't think that's credible. I think the ability to understand and manipulate language models is maybe part of what's going to get us to that next stage. But to my mind, these things need to be able to reason before we can really get another I guess paradigm shift out of them. And I think that's going to probably resemble some of the more traditional neurosymbolic type of AI that is out of favor at the moment, which is teaching it how to reason, explicit logical and mathematical reasoning, and having that integrate. With the language models, I think that's probably a fruitful. That's probably going to be a fruitful sort of endeavor. Again, none of this is obviously making science fiction type of AI's artificial sentience, where it's it has a funny personality and it might decide to destroy the world or whatever. I think this is just like getting smarter AI systems. I mean that to me is where we should be looking. That, and I think probably the other thing that we really need to start looking at is the sort of threats that come from this technology. So especially for us in records and archives, where it's these this technology is being used to generate disinformation, propaganda, and nonsense at incredible, unheard of scale, and we don't have tools to sift it. Being able to curate records and archives, and understand where this data is coming from, what it means, and how reliable it is. Like, that's going to be a huge difficulty. I think if you kind of go back to the the 5 V's of data science, which are velocity, volume, value, variety, like we're getting on top of those first 4 of them, but now veracity, the last V, is going to become a real challenge for us. And I hope we can be proactive about it, and start to firstly consider it as a threat, and secondly work out strategies to manage it.
Yeah, I guess there's ultimately still value in what we do as an archivist and records manager. Good to know that we won't be made redundant by AI. That's reassuring for my own profession in that sense. I think a lot of people, when they take steps to embrace digital records management, they are very afraid of technology. Now there's this AI element, so they will be always wondering, what can we do more as professionals in order to prepare ourselves better to sort of embrace this technology, to upskill our work, and also to save our own work in that sense, or else we will be always sort of engulfed with so much data, so much records, that I think it's just impossible to finish managing or manage archiving them in that sense.
Yeah, and look, if we go back to even that, classification system that I showed before, when we were first coming to market with that, there was a lot of question about, will people trust this? Do people want this? They can't, even those simpler machine learning models, you don't get explicit decision making. Like, is this going to be okay? Are organizations going to trust it? Now there's no problem with that. Nobody kind of questions that it's okay. And I think probably the same is going to be true with some of these AI tools. Like, once we understand how to use them, and what their capabilities are, but also their limitations, and maybe we have some code of practices about using them responsibly, I think they're a game changer, but I also don't think it's a I don't think it's an end game. Like, I think it helps us do the job that we're already struggling with. Like, we're drowning in digital data, and the manpower that we're getting in the businesses, I don't think growing to match. So this helps us sort of perhaps equalize that, and maybe is going to let us get on the front foot about realizing value out of the records that we maintain. But yeah, I don't see it putting us out of a job anytime soon. But yeah, I think probably the job needs to include understanding how to use them and what they're good for.
One last question from me. This is a project that we're doing at the moment for the ICA to help our members and the profession more generally stay ahead of AI. We've been putting you under the gun, Jason, in terms of the industry and what you're doing. What do you think an organisation like the ICA should be doing so that we can all of us take full advantage of this new and exciting technology?
It's hard to say. I guess beyond the sort of educational side of it, because I guess you don't have access to all the different archives everywhere, and I think a lot of the organizations maybe don't want people involved in them, but yeah, perhaps I guess advocating for what the technology is good at and advising about where there's threats is probably, those are probably the two things I'd consider most.
All right, that's wonderful. I don't know, Kit, if you've got any other questions you want to put Jason's feet to the fire any longer on any issue.
So I shall not torment him any longer. I think it has been a wonderful sharing session. It's very insightful, and I personally will want to discover more of how AI can sort of help our work as well. Time to come. Shall take on that role as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for listening to me talk. That's probably the most talking I'll do in the entire week. So I'm kind of looking forward to going back to my cave and maybe looking at some code.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Jason. All the best.
No worries at all. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Jason. Bye.
Well, that was quite an interesting and quite a comprehensive discussion and a presentation from Jason. Let's just talk amongst ourselves now and try and sort of distill what the key messages we thought came from that presentation. Moises, perhaps we could start with you. What were some of the takeaway messages or issues you came away with?
So, hi, David. So for me, a key lesson is how AI can improve pricing and selection through an iterative process. As Jason explained, the AI model is trained on pre-classified data, and as new records come in, the system learns from human feedback to improve its accuracy over time. I also found it's interesting how they use metrics to evaluate how well the model is performing. And these metrics help ensure the AI is making a correct classification, especially in situations where categories are unbalanced.
It was interesting that he did emphasize there's a big investment to be made in the preparation of training data and testing those results to make sure the training data is accurate. In one case, he mentioned, didn't he, that if the training data is unbalanced, if 85% of your training data is in one category, it'll just look like it's 85% accurate. I think that was a really interesting point. Kit, over to you. What are some of the key messages you found in that discussion?
I think one of the key takeaway for myself is actually there's a lot of behind the scene work, as what Moses has alluded to, a lot of things to prepare for. And I think the change management leading up to using AI, not just for appraisal and selection, actually fundamentally doing records management, right? there are still a lot of humans involvement and getting the fundamental rights, be it classification or filing the right records in the right categories, having the right disposition schedule within it, and how we link everything up together. So I think we think of AI just having the budget to just get an AI solution, and that's the quick fix, but it's not a quick fix. You need to make sure that your fundamentals are right before AI can actually produce the results for you as well. So I thought the point that Jason made about the months and efforts behind starting with training small data with small user, making sure they understand how to do the disposition scheduling right. I think all these fundamentals are really essential. No doubt we have the support of AI as well. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you. And these are really good issues to pull out here, because I think, I don't know about you guys, but you often get the impression that AI is going to automate everything. There's sometimes out of the box, it will magically do this work, but it's very interesting from both your points, Moises, and yours, Kit, that it's still a lot of work to be done, especially in this very complex area of appraisal and selection. Luis Esteve, let's hear from you.
Yes, well, I am really happy that classification is the main focus, one of the main focus of the presentation of Jason Franks, and I think this will be very, very positive for us, for the archivist. However, I would like to highlight some points that he commented about, for example, the complexity to apply the granularity in some kind of taxonomies, and how to apply the disposition rules. So I think in some way that oblige us also to rethink a little how we design and how we develop our classification schemes and how we categorize our taxonomies, and even how manage the metadata applied to all this content. On the other side, I have some doubts about the accuracy. So I think this is a new front for us. So accuracy around 80–85% could be very, very positive in large volumes of records, but to do mistakes for a 20 or 15% of the total could be a little crazy in some cases. So I think we are only at the beginning of the process, but it's very great. It's great.
This for me is a recurring theme of these investigations, that I sometimes hear that AI, as the industry says, that AI will eliminate all of these jobs, will disappear because of AI. And sometimes you hear these industry leaders say librarians and archivists will disappear because AI will automate their jobs. But the more I learn, the more I realize that for exactly those reasons you said, Luis Esteve, I agree with you. I think that the archivist is still as important, but AI is a wonderful tool. But yes, it's an 85% tool, and that 15% is a very important 15%. So yeah, I think that's a very, very good points to make. And on the change management issue as well, we should not underestimate the importance of introducing these tools and introducing them properly. So look, I think that's been a really good summary of issues and points from that presentation. We'll have those the links and the resources for our viewers who wish to follow up on this topic available on the screen at the end of this video, and those online resources will also be made available. So you'll see all the instructions to access those resources at the end of this recording. So look, with that, I think it's just for me to say thank you. Thank you to Jason for his very generous time in giving us that presentation, and thank you to all three of you for that discussion and digesting what we've learned from that presentation. Thanks, everyone.